Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I've got Stephan Kesting on the line, and Stephan is well known in the grappling community for being a Sambo guy, but you've also got an extensive background in the movie industry and in stunts and all that. So I'm really looking forward to chatting. I mean, I've had a fair amount of experience with Sambo, but to many people, it's just this exotic system of jumping, diving leg locks. Mm-hmm. And kind of vaguely related to Combat Sambo, and some really tough guys have come out of Russia and beaten up a bunch of guys in the UFC. So what's your connection with Sambo?
So I guess my connection, my first introduction to it was before I actually started formally training it. I had already been doing some rudimentary grappling, like mid-90s, exchanging videotapes on the underground forums and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly. And I had started doing some grappling tournaments. I did the first tournament I ever did was the 1998 Jean LaBelle World Grappling Challenge up in Toronto. And then at that time I was training at a Chinese martial arts school, but we were just doing grappling because that's what everybody was doing, And I had left Taekwondo in like 95, I guess. Like a lot of people after the UFC, they kind of just had to accept reality or which pill are you going to take, the red one or the blue one? So I took the...
That's an unfortunate use. That's an unfortunate metaphor in today's language, but I agree there came a fork in the road where you either had to acknowledge that, that I think initially it was like, we have to acknowledge that grappling's important. And then eventually we came to a more nuanced understanding that its training method is important. We can't just be standing there doing, monkey steals the peaches or maiden looks at a mirror.
Right.
Without the context of training that against somebody who's really trying to punch you in the head.
Yeah. I mean, I was fortunate a little bit. Like my Taekwondo teacher, I started Taekwondo kind of like pre-Olympic Taekwondo and left it post-Olympic Taekwondo. So I kind of saw that transition happen. And so we were actually doing like a lot of Hapkido stuff. We were doing a lot of takedowns. And so I wasn't unfamiliar with some things. And then interestingly enough, and I didn't realize it at the time, but like one of our regular warm-ups was belt wrestling. And I just thought it was a cool thing. We would interlock arms, grab each other's belts, and the first one to take the other guy down would win. And then I realized there's a whole tradition of like Shiram, and similar sumo style wrestling in Korea. So he had actually incorporated that into our warm-ups, but we didn't do a whole lot of grappling, but he didn't discourage us. We had like Friday night fights, and it was like all the black belt guys and higher belt guys, and we would just get together. And this was like sort of pre-foam dipped, where we had the knuckle covers that were just like, they looked like like a sock with some foam inside of it or whatever.
Yeah.
So we would have sparring night every Friday, and he didn't discourage us from messing around with grappling, even though we didn't really know a whole heck of a lot of what we were doing. But I have actually pictures of myself grappling back in the Taekwondo days. And then so I did decide that after the UFC, I remember we all gathered around and watched the first one. And it was just like a wake-up call, like we were talking about. There was a decision that had to be made. And 2 years later, I left. And then I found a Kung Fu school that I look back at it now, and I was saying it wasn't that realistic, but it was more realistic than what I was doing. They were doing, they were training Sanchao fighters and stuff like that. So it was a step up on the realism scale for me. And we were doing some rudimentary grappling, that mid-90s grappling, like I was mentioning before. And then finally, we went up to compete at the Jean LaBelle tournament. And then I trained, there was 3 seminars that weekend. There was LaBelle, of course. And then there was Goker, and there was Oleg Taktarov. So those were the first 3 actual grappling coaches I ever took a real lesson from. Mm. Ironically, none of them like jiu-jitsu people, right? Yeah. And I just loved it. And I was like, oh, this is what it's like to have a real grappling coach. And, not long after 98, by 99, I found my Sambo coach. And it wasn't that I was looking for Sambo specifically, but I was looking to leave the gym that I was at. And I knew what Sambo was from the UFC and stuff like that. And, but I just kind of heard through another former student that another student who was also leaving the gym where we're at, said, hey, there's this Russian guy teaching over. At the time, it was called Chao's Martial Arts. It was like a Chinese school, but they would rent out space to other people. And so he's like, oh, there's this Russian guy teaching Sambo over there. We should go check it out. And that was in 99. And then I was hooked after that, I was more hooked on him than Sambo, to be truthful. I was hooked on his coaching style, the way he broke down a class, very Soviet, scientific, trial and error. I came from, Shotokan as a kid, and then Taekwondo in my teen years, and in early adulthood, and then Kung Fu. And it was all very much about tailoring the person to the technique, like here's the technique and you're going to do it, whether you're 6 foot tall or 5 foot tall or whatever. And with him, he was the first person that actually told me, like, that don't do that technique. That's not good for you. Let's find one that works for you, or let's modify it for you. He was the first person that flipped the script for me.
I suppose it comes from the sport background. I mean, if you're coming from a Soviet background and there was a good deal of status and prestige involved in being a coach, you really wanted to have your athletes win. I suppose some sports, they just, if you're not 6 foot tall or 6'5", you're probably not going to make it in the NBA. Maybe there's a tiny little niche you can exploit. If you're 150 pounds, you're not going to make it in the NFL. If you're not of a certain body type, if you're 200 pounds, you're not going to be a marathon runner.
Yeah.
But in grappling, it's diverse enough that you could succeed multiple different ways. So then the sport has to evolve to look multiple different ways. It's not a sport where they go, this is our one perfect body type, and that's all we're going to go for.
Yeah, and not just type. Like years later, like when I started going to Russia to train over there, and I was training with, I've gone a bunch of times to train with Igor Koronoy, and he will always bring in other people. Like we'll go for 2 weeks, and then he'll bring in other coaches to work with us. So he brought in an Olympic silver medalist in gymnastics to teach us some basic tumbling and things like that. And one of the things that the gymnast told us was he was always jealous of the combat sports guys because their program was based on the fact that whether it's a wrestling match or whatever, there's a very large improvisational nature of what they have to do. So the athletes would not only do their main style of wrestling, but they were encouraged to do soccer, beach volleyball, this, that, all these other sports to train their body in diverse ways to sort of honor this improvisational aspect of the sport that they compete in. Whereas the gymnast was like, yeah, I know the Olympics is in 2 years and I'm going to be doing the same floor routine for the next 2 years. That's all I'm going to do to make that perfect. So he was always jealous of the wrestlers and the Sambo guys and the judo guys because they got to, quote unquote, have so much fun and do all these other things. So even when we go train with Koronoy, our morning warm-ups would be soccer or beach volleyball or some other sport,
Hello, podcast friends. Just a super quick reminder that right now, the arm drag and 2-on-1 formula is out. This is a 4-volume instructional that takes you through the arm drag position and the 2-on-1 position, which are 2 grips where you control the elbow and the wrist. And you can use this from the open guard, the butterfly guard, the half guard, the De La Hiva guard, the closed guard, to mainly take the back, but also to set up sweeps and attacks and submissions and stop the other guy from passing your guard. Included in this instructional, which I did with Rob Bernacki, are not only the techniques themselves, but also the strategies for using these techniques, the combinations, the setups, and most importantly, the training methods, how to get really good at these positions as fast as possible. If you want to find out more, if you want to take advantage of the sale pricing, go to grapplearts.com/arm drag to check it out. It's available on DVD, it's available as an online streaming product, and it's available on the Grapple Arts BJJ Master app. All right, back to the podcast.
So what is the sort of, if there is such a thing, a standard Russian Sambo workout like? I mean, there's kind of the standard Jiu-Jitsu warm-up that's done, call it at 60% of the gyms, where you run and you shrimp and you bridge and you go in a circle and then you learn a couple of techniques, then you spar. Like I'm not saying that's the best way to do it. In fact, some people made pretty good arguments, but that's easily recognizable as the jiu-jitsu format. There's an easily recognizable judo format. You know, you do this much uchikomi, you do this much randori, then you go to the ground and you do 10 minutes of newaza, and that's a class.
Right.
So what's the standard default out of the box Sambo class like?
The warm-ups would be very similar to, let's say, like your standard judo class. I think a lot more acrobatics involved. You know, a lot more handstands and dive rolls and flips and things like that. But I think one of the main differences I've discovered, for example, like in a jiu-jitsu class, because I've cross-trained a bunch of jiu-jitsu, obviously, too. You know, you'll be doing your forward rolls, you'll be doing your shrimps or whatever, your peek outs, your sit outs, whatever. What I found different, at least in training in some of the American jiu-jitsu, or even, I won't even say American, I'll say New York oriented. And then we could even say Queens oriented if you want to get that narrow. But it's like, you know, some of my local jiu-jitsu clubs, that the warm-ups are done almost on autopilot with no real intent to understand why you're doing that movement at all. It just becomes this thing that you do to warm up. And the difference that I found, especially going to train in Russia, was that there was never a movement that you did that was not drilled into, this is why you're doing it. So it's like, even like my warm-ups, we'll do shrimping, but I will ride the guys if their arms are extended too much. I'm like, would you do that in mount? If somebody's mounted you, you're going to get arm barred. No, your arms should be tight to you. But if you watch people do shrimping, they almost sometimes will look like they're bowing, you know, and nobody's telling them no. I mean, or making the connection. Like, you might go into a class after your warm up and the instructor might say, look, when you're mounted, you never stick your arms up and try and bench press somebody off you. But it's never told to them when they're shrimping to not do that. So people are sort of building in bad habits, you know. And so one of the big things that I found in training in Russia, it's not so much the physical moves, but it's like the didactic nature of everything is broken down. And this is exactly why you do it, you know, from warm up to end. And the other big difference that I found training over there, and I've heard very similar comments from people who have trained like Muay Thai in Thailand, for example, like we would do, let's say I'm there for 2 weeks, and then maybe 4 nights of those 2 weeks, we'd go over to Sambo 70 for Randori night, right? And it's just like massive halls. One half, they're doing judo rules. The other half, they're doing Sambo rules. And you can go back and forth. Some guys are in gi, some guys are in kurtka, like the Sambo jacket. They don't really care what you wear so much. And I've never did Randori and sparred for 3 hours without being so not being beat up. You know what I mean? Like, they all are essentially professional athletes, and they know that if they get hurt, they're not going to earn a living, or they're not going to get that stipend that's going to, if they win the world championship or a national championship, that's going to get them an apartment or a car or whatever it's going to get them, or get their home club more funding from the government, right? Because medals bring in funding. And so they are very aware and egoless. There's no ego. Whereas, you know, we all know the deal in a lot of jiu-jitsu schools. It's like, okay, tone it down. Okay, tone it down.
Yeah.
We don't have to keep going up this way, especially for the guys that come once or twice a month, because that's the 2 times a month they can feel like in touch with their aggro male self or whatever, because they're sitting at a desk doing computer work most of the time, and they got to show up to the gym and do their thing.
I wonder if it's a Brazilian thing, and now this is, of course, a giant generalization based on just a few data points, but you hear about Team Shootbox back in the day with Shogun and Vanderlei, and stories of them sparring full contact, full MMA, tiny little MMA gloves, like 2 days before a fight, 2 days before they were fighting in Pride.
I don't think it's a Brazilian thing, because the Lions Den did the same thing back in the day, and so did Miletich. You know, I think the difference is that you're looking at large scale professional sports institution knowing how to properly train, and then small localized MMA teams that don't know how to train. That all these years later, now you're finding like pro fighters saying, yeah, I don't really spar that much. You know, I mean, you have to spar a little bit. You have to know what it's like to be under fire, right?
Yeah.
But you can be a very successful athlete, MMA fighter, or jiu-jitsu or judo, or any combat sports athlete, without always going full on all the time. In fact, you probably will be a better athlete, you know?
Well, I think there might also be a difference between the standing grappling arts and the ground grappling arts. Because, I mean, I've done a fair amount of standing grappling, judo and wrestling, but way more jiu-jitsu. And all of my injuries have come from the stand-up martial arts. So I just think when you have like people falling through space, wrapping gis around each other, refusing to let go of a grip, trying to twist out of some fall so they can play the rules and not, you know, deny the other guy some points, or try and counter the throw into the very... It's just a situation that's rife for catastrophic injuries and very, very dramatic injuries. There's not a judo tournament. I mean, even in a jiu-jitsu tournament, a lot of injuries happen from the 10 seconds that the guys are standing.
Look, there's a reason why like OSHA has fall protection and regulations starting at such a low elevation, because you only need like a fall from 6 feet or so to hit your head wrong and die. You know what I mean? I mean, it could be that bad. So,
and Kataguruma is picking somebody up onto your shoulders at roughly a height of 6 feet and then diving down onto the ground, probably with your weight on top of them.
Yeah. It's, and you're right. I used to laugh before, you know, when jiu-jitsu was still largely sort of had the prohibition on footlocks and leg locks because of injuries and stuff. And I'd be like, dude, it's takedowns and wrestling and throws where I've seen the most messed up knees and messed up ankles and hips and things like that. And mostly with wrestling shoes, you know, like in the early days of the American Sambo Association, we used to allow Sambo shoes and wrestling shoes. And then eventually we stopped allowing wrestling shoes because we realized most of those shoes are not designed for judo style throws. The rubber soles on the mat, the way they stick, they're designed for wrestling, which is basically straight on driving, right? So it makes sense. It doesn't make sense for throws and takedowns where your feet are sliding laterally on the mat and things like that. Or where where your legs might be intertwined and your leg has to slip out and the sole sticks on the mat. So we eventually realized that most of the injuries were, and there weren't a ton, but you know, at every tournament there was one. And you would notice that they were the wrestling shoe guys, not the Sambo shoe guys. Now, Sambo shoes have a leather bottom. It's much slicker, like it's like a moccasin. And it's it gives you the ankle support of a wrestling shoe, but the slickness of a barefoot. So you get a little bit of grip, but you also can slide. And it's it's just a much safer shoe for that kind of takedown. So we ended up putting a prohibition on the wrestling shoes.
Can you take us through sort of the rules of Sambo and distinguish out regular Sambo from combat Sambo from
like military Sambo and all?
Yeah, I think it gets really confusing for people as, you know, where are you allowed to choke? Where are you allowed to punch?
Sure.
You know, what is Khabib really doing? You know, what did Fedor do? You know,
Well, so I always start by saying like Sambo is an umbrella term, like karate is an umbrella term. And then underneath that umbrella, you have like Shotokan karate, Goju, Isshin Ryu, like all these different kinds of karate, right? And it's the same with Sambo. Sambo has become an umbrella term. And so underneath it, you have two competitive variants. There's sport Sambo, which in the old days used to just be called Sambo, right? But then they had to differentiate it because competitive combat Sambo came along. The first worlds for combat Sambo was in 2000. So, I mean, it was being done like on a sort of intramural and military police basis before that, but not on such a large scale as the worlds. So 2000, they launched combat Sambo. So then what are you going to call the other Sambo? You can't call them both Sambo. So you have combat Sambo and sport Sambo, right? But honestly, like if you go to Russia and you say, I do Sambo, most people are going to assume you do the sport version.
Right.
But
that's the bigger branch.
It's the bigger branch. And unfortunately, what's ironic is, and we'll get to the rules in a second, but what's ironic is that the Combat Sambo is literally the larger sort of marketing piece for Sambo, for FIAS, the International Federation Amateur Sambo. They'll use Khabib and Fedor and all these guys to promote Sambo. But within the ranks of the organization, a lot of the old timers really do not like Combat Sambo.
It's no different from Jiu-Jitsu schools paying homage to Royce Gracie and Carlson Gracie and the stories of Vale Tudo back in Brazil, but they've never ever, some of them have never ever trained with even slaps to the face. Forget like padded punching to the face. It's we all like to wrap ourselves in the mythology of our art. It's just the only difference here is our mythology is not that long ago compared to some traditional kung fu system that can't fight its way out of a wet paper bag, but likes to refer back to 12 generations of grandmasters ago when the Master Fulin Yu defeated an entire Mongol army by himself.
And that really happened too. But it's like, it's true. I mean, I remember back in the early 2000s when I first opened my gym, which was in 2003, there was a guy by the name of Dan Gonzalez. He was a Machado black belt, but he also happened to be a DEA agent. And he would come through New York sometimes. And back then, like if you would open the grappling magazines, there'd be like, Machado Jiu-Jitsu. And there'd be like 3 schools. Now there's like hundreds, right? But the ad in the magazine had 3 schools and 1 authorized instructor, and that was Dan, right? And he would come by and work out with us. And back then he was, we would do all our warm-ups of grappling with slap boxing and stuff like what you're talking about. And it was a typical thing. And he would say that as he traveled and trained at different schools, even back then, he's like, I see it changing. I see it already going, and he wasn't saying it in a place of judgment. It was just more like an acknowledgement. Like it's just the sportification is happening, like that mass marketing of jiu-jitsu is happening.
Jiu-jitsu is for everyone as opposed to in the 90s when it was most definitely not for everyone. I mean, if you weren't okay with walking into a place where 2/3 of the guys are walking around in little bad boy shorts and nothing else, and 2 of them are bleeding from the mouth. That was pretty typical.
Yeah, so I mean, it definitely has changed a lot. But to the rules aspect, and a lot of the old timers still think that Combat Sambo is too barbaric and it shouldn't be something that they sanction. And we're better than that. They're like more highbrow or whatever. Yet they'll certainly use it to market Sambo. But when it comes to the rules, basically there's a point system that is the same, almost identical in both of them. So in Sports Sambo, now it's an 8-point differential will give you a technical victory. So basically the 3 ways that you can win, discounting, disqualifications and medical things like that. But the 3 main ways you can win are either an 8-point differential, total victory throw, which is like sort of like Sambo's version of an ippon, which unlike judo, you must remain on your feet and your opponent must land flat on his back. So I can't do like a Harai Makikomi from judo, put you on your back and win by landing on
roll over top of me.
Yeah, I can't. I will get points for that in Sambo, but I will not win with that. So and
then the 8-point differential is like a mercy rule in ping pong. If you get far enough ahead, they just go, okay.
It used to be 12 points, and I actually prefer the 12 points. But in their push for Olympic status, they narrowed it down to 8 points, hoping that you would get more exciting matches. And I didn't think that they would, but they actually kind of did because people are fighting harder for the points quicker. But so you've got so you can win by perfect throw, by differential of points, or by submission. I mean, those are the 3 ways. In terms of the point scoring, there's a hierarchy of points based on quality of throw. So if I throw you to your back and I remain on my feet, I win. If I throw you to your side and I remain on my feet, I get 4 points. If I throw you to your belly or butt, I get 2 points if I remain on my feet. There's no points for getting someone to hands and knees or turtle position or to touch the floor, like in Shuaijiao, if I make your hand touch the floor, I get points. There's none of that in Sambo. And they got rid of advantage points. There was a time, when they had like advantage points, but they got rid of it and they just kind of, and I agree with them. Advantage points, like you start diving too much in the meta of the game people start fighting for advantages instead of actual finishes. But anyway, so they got rid of the advantage points. So it's win 4 or 2 points if the thrower remains on their feet. If I go down to the mat with you, it's 4, 2, or 1. So 4 if you go to your back, 2 if you go to your side, 1 if you go to belly or butt. And you can continually score points throughout the match. On the mat, there's no points for positional changes or near submissions or anything like that. The only time you can score points is with a pin, shoulders to the mat, right? And for a 20-second pin, you get 4 points. For a 10-second pin, you get 2 points. And the maximum you can score for pins is 4 points.
So if I have you in the closed guard, but my shoulders are on the mat, does that count as a pin?
Yes, but I have to be chest to chest with you, so I can't be like, I can't be sitting back, and you're not no closed guard in Sambo either. There's no closed guard. There is in combat Sambo because they allow chokes, but we'll get to that in a minute. But there's in sports Sambo no closed guard. Ironically, people don't realize or think of it, but you have a lot of really good open guard players in sports Sambo because you have guys trying to get off their back because you could potentially lose, right? Like a 4-point throw and then a 20-second pin, I won. That's 8 points. So there's a lot of really good open guard players because it's so imperative that they get off their back. So it's either sweep or stand. It's a big part of the game is if you get taken down, just like wrestling, guys will try to go to their belly immediately. There's no chokes, right? So they're not as worried about that. But there are leg locks and there are a gazillion leg attacks from a belly down opponent.
Do you know why there are no chokes? It's always seemed really strange for a combat art to not have chokes. I also thought it was strange that there weren't really leg locks, or that leg locks were a very, very niche aspect of jiu-jitsu. So I thought both are strange.
I think I've heard different stories, and some gear towards more mythology, and some seem a little more realistic to me.
What's the mythological one?
The mythological ones are the ones that promote this whole like connection to the military.
Oh, that's the break a man's arm. If you choke him, you'll kill him. But if you break his arm, he'll need a buddy to take him off the battlefield.
Yeah, or that even chokes are, and this is not untrue, that chokes are too difficult on the battlefield with all the backpacks and gear and this and that and the other thing. But it always seemed, I don't know, because I was training with some old timers and was told that pre-World War II, there were chokes. Like in the early days of competitive Sambo, there were chokes. And it was still like, because there's a large part of Sambo comes from judo. And so chokes were allowed pre-World War II. Then during World War II, like all the national championships stopped and all this kind of stuff. And then when they resumed after the war, there were no chokes, right? So the mythology is this whole, it's more practical for self-defense and like military, like whatever. They just use it to push that story.
It's really differentiation against judo. I mean, there was a lot of hard feelings between the Russians and the Japanese.
Exactly. That's what I think
1900s.
It was. I think it was just during the post-World War II, during the purges in the Soviet Union, and uber nationalism for the Soviet Union, there was no way they were going to admit that their beloved style came from Japan, in part at least, right? And in the early history of Sambo, they don't even really mention the Japanese founder. The two guys credited with being the founder, Oshchepkov, who was the judo man, and then Spiridonov, who was like the sort of the Russian man, who developed his stuff with all the different Soviet styles and things like that.
See, I've always just heard about the Soviet style. I mean, obviously it had to have, there's too many similarities for there not to have been cross-pollination. But you really don't, there was this style here from, I don't know, this part of Kazakhstan where they did leg locks, and this style here from this part of Turkmenistan where they would throw based on the belt, and this series of just so stories.
I mean, that's all true. I mean, if you go to like, like Karash from Uzbekistan, and there's a sport called Turan from Kazakhstan. No, is it not Kazakhstan? It's Kyrgyzstan. No, yeah, Kazakhstan. I guess I get all the stands mixed up. But
One of the stands.
Yeah, and then there's Kyrgyzstan has its own stuff, and Turan is essentially like combat sambo or MMA in a jacket. It's the same type of thing. And then you've got that whole region. Khabib, as an example, are stud wrestlers. Wrestling is something you do from childhood, so it's not untrue that all of that was brought into sambo. In fact, the jacket. Again, the sambo jacket, which has the cuffs, the shoulder cuffs, and the belt going through the jacket, which jiu-jitsu should adopt. You'll never worry about your jacket getting untucked again. But then you can't do all them crazy loop chokes.
Lapel.
Yeah. But in any event, so the propaganda behind the jacket is that is to mimic like either military uniform or like backpack straps, or they'll come up with all these things, right? The reality, I think, is that it was really to appease all the different stylists in the Soviet Union, because a lot of those wrestling styles, like Georgian wrestling, for example, they'll wear a vest. Mm-hmm. So a lot of them are used to grabbing here. There's no sleeves to grab, or Shuaijiao, or Mongolian wrestling, where they have the sleeves. Yeah,
Mongolian wrestling basically has a couple of, it's like a vest shrunk down as much as the vest could possibly shrink down. It's kind of like a pair of suspenders that only go around the front of your shoulders and then to the middle of your back.
So a lot of the wrestlers from the Soviet republics were used to grabbing by the shoulders or the belt, right? So you make the belt a more secure handle. You give those guys something to grab on by the shoulders. We can still do sleeves because of the judo guys and Japanese jiu-jitsu guys and stuff like that. So I think the jacket was just an attempt to give something to everybody.
Okay. So then, obviously Sambo, sports Sambo is well known for its leg locks. And when it started to come to North America, it seemed like that was a real generation of leg lock intensive Sambo players coming across it. Or like Tartarov, Gokor, those guys.
Yeah.
But I know that there are people who compete in Sambo who basically don't do leg locks. It basically looks like judo. And they basically just disdain that whole aspect of it.
Fedor never won a fight with a leg lock. All his submissions were arm bars. It's like belly down arm bar, in fact. Belly down arm bar is a very sort of Russian style arm bar. Not going chest to the sky, but going chest to the mat. And part of that also has to do with the fact that Sambo guys were going to their belly on purpose to avoid pins. So it totally makes sense that would.
I remember training under Oleg Tartarov, and I had a judo-style rolling armbar against Turtle where I would end up belly down and then pull the guy over top of me to go belly up. And he looked at me like I was stupid and like, why would you roll him? Why not just finish him belly down? And so it's interesting that little moment is exactly indicative of what you're talking about. Just a preference for belly down armbars.
And again, it's a cultural thing. It's like the, rules dictate tactics. Armbar is an armbar, and how you get there and how you finish it. Like the process to get to that point is what changes based on tactics or whatever, on rule sets. But to your original point, like I would say to your question about some guys never do leg locks, some guys, more matches are won by armbar than leg lock. Without a doubt, statistically, that stuff's measured. Like, there's definitely more armbar finishes in sports sambo than legs. And I would just say that it goes to individual difference. It's like just like jiu-jitsu. You have some schools that they are known for X, and other schools that are known for Y. And so my coach was really into leg locks. Like, he loved leg locks. And that was obviously, that love was passed on to me. I learned to love leg locks. And then my students like Riley Bodycomb and all these other guys, they learned to love leg locks. It is a sambo tradition, but it's more a my coach tradition, Whereas you can go to other sambo schools, they never do leg locks, ever. Especially if they do a lot of judo cross training, where it's useless to train that. Because a lot of the judo and sambo guys are the same guys in Russia. But
so they'll cross compete?
Oh yeah, totally. 100. That's like I was saying in Sambo 70. The name is Sambo 70, but like it's judo this side, Sambo that side. Go back and forth between the rules.
Is that still true after the Japanese Judo Federation, the IJJF or whatever the heck it is, changed the rules basically to make any kind of grappling that looked like Sambo illegal? All the alternate gripping?
It's still the same. It's judo. So, international sport dominance has always been, it was a thing to demonstrate prowess by the Soviet Union, and it's still a thing to demonstrate prowess in Russia. And judo is an Olympic sport, and as long as it's an Olympic sport, they're gonna pour a ton of effort into bringing home those medals. And what's really cool though is the first time I went to Sambo 70 was in 2008, and they had just judo and Sambo there. Then the next time I went to Sambo 70 was in 2013, and they had a full MMA and Combat Sambo program from that time to that time. You can see it's a timeline changing of the times. And this is why you see all these beasts coming out, because it's a state-sponsored sports program, right? So Sambo 70 is literally a grammar school, high school for kids. During the day, they're running around in their sweater vests with little purple, they look like little school kids. And as soon as school's over, they're training. That's it. And some of them now it's not only just doing judo and Sambo, but they're now doing Combat Sambo MMA too.
Right.
And so you figure 2013, give or take, at the beginning of that stuff, 2020, give us 2033, you're going to have a whole bunch of 20-year-olds coming, 23-year-olds, 24-year-olds coming out of there, these like fighter beasts that have been doing it since childhood. Like
Khabib is kind of the first of that generation.
Yeah.
Sort of. I mean, I don't know if he trained at Sambo 70. I imagine at some point he would have. He did?
No, he didn't. I don't think he did ever, but it doesn't matter. The philosophy of how to train athletes is the same. It's all the same.
Just to dwell on the leg locks for an additional second, they're all, at least what I've seen in traditional Sambo, it's straight leg locks. There's no heel hooking.
No heel hook and no toe hold either. Okay. That's why I would laugh. Like, people would say, oh, Sambo, the leg lock style, that's only by comparison. Like when people were saying that, we got that rep because we allowed it, whereas judo and jiu-jitsu weren't. So it's like, kind of people assumed like, oh, they're all leg lock masters, But like I said, some were, some weren't. And it was, I always said like in the early days of like when Riley was just a young guy, just first competing and stuff, like you could be a mediocre leg locker and go into tournaments and just clean up. Like that's obviously not the case now, but there was a period of time where you could,
huge relative competitive advantage because it was a land of the blind, one-eyed man situation. I'm not going to mention any names, but I have seen Russian Sambo guys who are fairly decent at throwing, and they had, unorthodox gripping strategies, and they did really well in judo competition. And when you asked them to show you a leg lock, they wouldn't say no. But what they would show you it was like asking somebody who'd watched a bunch of UFCs show you an armbar. And it was like, I knew enough about leg locking at that point from, people like Eric Paulson and people like Oleg Taktarov, and even people like Danny Inosanto to say, no, this guy you can just look at somebody and go, I know there's different ways to do this, but that ain't one of them.
No, and it's true. And some of them like hadn't really practiced or learned leg locks probably from when they were a kid, but
they had this reputation that they had to like now live up to. Oh, you're Russian. You must be a god of leg locks. Well, no, you'll happily teach them, but you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's I don't know. I'm sure there are equivalents in jiu-jitsu.
100%.
It's just guys like that should just realize they should just say, hey, my specialty is XYZ. Let me show you that.
I've seen people who are world class at half guard trying to fake their way through showing the spider guard, and it'd be one thing if they had prefaced it by saying, "Look, this is not my game. Here's the two things I know, but you could better go to somebody else for the details. This is outside my knowledge, area of special knowledge." At that point, I've got no problem. Like, you're being honest.
Yeah, just own it. It's cool. I mean, look, everything has something to offer, and so just own, this is what I know, and I wouldn't bank on it, but here, I'll show it to you. Yeah. But to your original question, so like that whole point scoring system for Sambo translates over to Combat Sambo.
So same points.
Same points. You don't get any points for strikes. So in Combat Sambo, the only way for a strike to really be valuable is to either knock somebody out or set up your throw.
Okay.
Right. So if I knock you down, belly butt, they score it like a throw. Like if I hit you and you drop, I'll get points. But
if I land on my butt, that's 4 points.
Yeah, exactly. It's like well, it's you can't. There's no total victory like throw version of box, with strikes unless I knock you out. That's it.
Okay.
But you get lower points, but they'll score it like a throw. So you could box all day, and the guy gets one throw on you, you're gonna lose. So it's like your strikes. It's very sort of combative mentality. It's like get in.
It seems like that would really drive the action towards heavy strikes.
It does, because they're either trying to end it, put you on the mat where they can get a position and finish you, or strike their way into a clinch that's advantageous for them to get a kind of throw that they want. It's all about finishing the fight fast. I mean, that's the mentality. It's like strike, throw, submit, but not strike for a whole round. And then, it's like literally strike your way into a throw your way into a submission. Bam.
So then statistically, how do those, if we go to a high level Combat Sambo tournament, how do they end? What percent knockouts, what percent throws, what percent submissions?
If you watch the Combat Sambo Worlds, it's amazing how much diversity you'll see. Kind of like
I've seen highlights. I just don't have any sense of the big picture. Well,
so the big picture is like you may not one would think you're gonna see just guys going willy-nilly into into a throw, just wild strikes to get the clinch or whatever, and that definitely happens. But you definitely also see guys who just want to strike. There's people know what their skills are. And there are guys that know, like, I have 5 minutes, I think I can knock you out, or I can really drop you or really damage you. So it's kind of like any combat sport, like even MMA. Like you see those fights where the guys kind of just made this unconscious agreement. We're going to have a kickboxing match today. Yeah. And you're like, what? You could take him down right there. But they don't do it. And you see the same thing in Combat Sambo. It's like people kind of just will gravitate towards what they're good at,
Are you allowed to hold and strike, sort of hockey fighting style, or like the early, was it combat jiu-jitsu? There were some early combat jiu-jitsu
tournaments. You can hold and strike, and you can also headbutt. You can
really?
Yeah, you can headbutt.
Standing and on the ground?
Yes.
Wow. And you can strike on the ground?
Yes. And you can do chokes, gi chokes and non-gi chokes too.
And you are wearing gloves?
Yes. You're wearing MMA gloves, headgear. You're wearing headgear and shin guards. And up until only just a few years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, groin shots were allowed too. It was still very much like no holds barred kind of still,
Okay.
But
so I know you've predicted a wave of really high level young Russians coming out of the Sambo programs there. But what level of athlete are we seeing? If you're a high-level athlete in the United States, you're probably not going into MMA. If you're super high-level, you're still probably going to go into basketball or football.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's where the money is.
Yep.
And that's where slightly less brain trauma is, and that's where more chicks are. What's the incentive system in Russia? Are we getting the highest? Are we getting...
It's a good question. I mean, I don't know if I have an exact answer for you, but I think, like Russia set up a national MMA federation, just like they have a Sambo federation. Like they do, it's a thing, and they value it. Like they very much value combat sports. So just like Sambo and everything, Combat Sambo will bring prestige to your club if you train champions. And how many will go to like the UFC or something? I don't know. I think you're going to see, because of the government oversight, it's only going to be the top of the top guys, or the guys that they think will bring prestige. I mean, if you remember like the early days of Khabib's beginning of his career, he was a very proud anti-Russian. He was very proud.
Chechen.
No, not Chechnyan, but from Caucasus. He's not from Chechnya. He's from. I'm brain farting, but from the Caucasus region, and there you can find articles where it say, "Hey, this wave of Russian fighters coming over here and kicking ass in MMA are not really ethnic Russian. They're from different Caucasus regions." But once he started making a name, all of a sudden he's having lunch with Putin. He's going to the Kremlin. So his tune changed quite a bit. And that's probably because you've got the overlord saying, "Hey, listen, we're going to fund you, but you better toe the line in terms of,
Yeah, if you'd ever like another visa to leave the country ever again."
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think probably the future fighters will be the same. It's like who is going to bring the best prestige to us? Who's the best propaganda tool?
Okay. Where does that crazy ass 5-on-5 Russian MMA come from? Is that now the new redheaded stepchild? Combat Sambo has been benedicted and brought into the fold, and now they've what can we do that's even crazier?
I saw that. I was like, oh my god, it's crazy. I don't know where it came from, who's behind it. I honestly don't. It looks pretty fun though.
It really does seem like the strategy is just to turn it from 5-on-5 to 5-on-4 as fast as humanly possible.
Yeah, take out,
and then it's all downhill.
Yeah, take out the weakest link, and then move on from there.
I would just be horrified to see the injury statistics from that.
Yeah. But
and then they've got the 3D versions where they've got hills and high ground, and
it's like a cross between. It's like combat CrossFit or combat tag.
There's that World Tag Championships where they're leaping around, sort of parkour.
Yeah. That looks.
Yeah, maybe they should have it like a parkour gym, MMA and a parkour gym.
Have you ever heard of Unisport?
I have not.
Look up Unisport. That's where actually before you knew him from MMA, Karatanov was a Unisport champion. And so I saw Unisport for the first time when I was teaching in Serbia in 2004, and I was just watching TV in my hotel room, and I'm flipping the channels, and there's this thing, and I'm like, what the hell is this? And it was insane. In a cool way, it's a military style obstacle course, like rope climb, web climbing under the barbed wire, over the walls, target shooting. You get to a station, target shooting. At the end of the course is a ring, and you get into the ring and you fight the other guy. So you race each other through this course, and then at the end you get into a ring and fight. And it's like blue and red gis, headgear, like Combat Sambo basically in a gi. Yeah. And it was so the incentive, obviously, to win the race and do better on the target shooting, all that counted. I don't honestly know how they would score it all, but just the concept was amazing, because the guy who finished the obstacle course first had a little time to breathe before they had the other guy that would come in second would come into the ring with the dude waiting, ready to go already. It was so awesome.
Well, why wouldn't you just stroll through it at a Sunday stroll pace?
Yeah,
and come into the. There has to be some kind of incentive structure.
We'll have to get somebody in there to figure out those rules. I don't know how to game them. I mean, you can game any set of rules, but it's it was just awesome. It was really cool.
Well, that was a point that when I had Riley Bodycomb on the podcast, he obviously thought a ton about how rule sets drive the expression of a sport.
Yep.
The changes that are going to happen in the IBJJF no-gi division, now that they're allowing reaping, finally, and heel hooks, is incredible. It's going to be unrecognizable, I think.
Oh, it will. You're gonna
personally, I wish that they would allow reaping at blue belt and purple belt level, just so people could get familiar with the positions.
Yeah.
And then add in the twisting leg locks later. I think a graduated progression would be smarter, but that's just me.
No, I agree with you, and I feel the same way. I'm not a big fan of the heel hook fetish that exists right now. I mean, I don't hate it. Don't get me wrong, I love heel hooks, but I just feel like so many people have become so direction, unidimensional, like a single focus. And it's like, this is just speaking for myself personally. I'm always more interested in building a well-rounded overall grappler, you know? And so
is that because you're an instructor and you have to teach different people, or is maybe if you're a competitor, you have to be hyper specialized? It's a bit like saying, I'm just playing the devil's advocate here, Steve.
I don't disagree. Like my coach even used to say, look, you want to be a good competitor, you just need to know 3 throws. Right. You need to do them so well that your opponent knows what your 3 throws are, and you're still going to throw them. You know, so it's the same with the leg locks. You know, with the massive interest in heel hooks right now. I guess it's probably just my instructor personality, wanting to build well-rounded people, that it just annoys me. And it also kind of annoys me because I was blowing that trumpet a long time ago. And so I'm kind of like past that. Like, I'm happy that it's happening. Don't get me wrong. I'm like totally happy that it's happening. And I love the meta game and the fact that it's evolving in such a way, and directly related to rule sets, right? Like, so a lot of the newer sort of control positions, or I don't know if they're new control positions, but they're just kind of more nuanced control positions and attacks.
You mean the lower body?
Yeah, controls? Lower body control, leg control positions. Like, it's all.
Did Sambo have names for them all? Because I actually think giving it a name and saying, you know, whether you're calling this Ashigarami or you're calling this 411 or you're calling this game over, you know, there's of course every position's got 5 different names, but by giving it a name or a set of names, it creates an identifiable way station on the road from, you know, no leg entanglement to leg entanglement to finish. I think just the act of identifying the positions, and kind of, we can argue about the hierarchy, which is, you know, is double outside ashi better than, I don't know, 411. But does this nomenclature exist in Sambo originally, the way you remember it?
No, well, not like that. We just numbered them. 1,
really?
2, 3, 4.
Leg locks or leg lock positions?
The leg control positions.
Really? Okay, so what was
Ashigarami? Like what everybody, the sort of outside reap, you know, with the top side foot. That's position 1. We just call it position 1. That's like your basic first position, right?
Sure.
I'm in your guard. I fall to my side. I reap you, and I have the foot on the top side. Position 1. That's like sort of your main basic one. Yeah. And then 2 is where you I control your free leg with my leg, kind of stretch you out. 3 is sort of like, I guess, the honey hole. You know, I reap over and go under the other leg, over and under. That's position 3. The leg knot is position 4. And then we actually had like 4A and 4B based on which side the foot was going to go on. And then we always had, in my club, not for my coach, but like sort of like this was just developed. Like, honestly, as I got more into training competitors, like we did have to come up with a system, right? Like, what do I call what do I say from the corner? Like, it's so easy to say, go to position 3, you know, but it's basically like sort of, we just categorized everything as high side and low side and outside and inside. So high side would be if I'm trying to leg lock you, if your leg is on my high side? Yep. So like position 1, if I lay down and reap your right leg, and my left leg is coming over and your foot is on the top, that's the high side. That's high side outside. Right? So it's like your foot is on the outside of me and it's on the high side. And then
now the terminology for that would be the weak side Ashigarami. Which, as opposed to having the foot that you're attacking, I don't know how we're going to do this on the video.
Call it, that would be like low side inside. Yeah. So basically, like, let's say I had that position, the number 1 position, like the ashi, the classic ashi, right? And then I lay you down. Your target leg, the one I'm attacking, is now on the bottom, and I put your foot on my other armpit, right? That's the low side inside, because now your foot is on the inside.
Okay.
And then there's low side outside, where I just stay laid on it. Let's say single leg X, I put my foot on your hip, and I'm laying on top of your leg, that's the low side outside, you know.
We're low side. I'm just taking advantage of this for my own education and my own history nerd. When I first learned leg locks, so I'll say in the mid 90s, the preference was for the high side, for ashigarami to go for having the opponent's leg on the high side, or as the terminology now is, weak side ashi. And I think that was just because it was easier to access the heel hook from there. Now it seems very much so that it's, and my own preferences as well, to have that foot buried. Was there a preference back then for you guys? And has that changed?
No, I mean, my coach, we would do low side and high side, I hate the terminology weak side because I think weak is a poor choice of words. I
agree, because there are a whole bunch of weak side specialists who seem to be doing just fine.
Yeah, exactly. But I still prefer to set up whichever lock I'm going to do and then lay on it. Like, I don't like to lay on it and then try and set it up. So I still will go to high side, probably just because it's been drilled into me for decades.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll go to high side to set it up and then lay on it.
Okay.
You know, like, so especially, let's say, I go to the basic ashi or the position 1, right? So your foot is on my top side, and I set up a heel hook. And your movement pattern to escape would be to roll with the heel hook.
Mm-hmm.
So by setting it up on the top side and then rolling to the low side, I'm rolling in the opposite way that you want to roll to escape. So I'm actually adding more torque and going the opposite direction that you want to go. So if I'm doing heel hooks, I definitely still love to set it up here and then lay on it after, rather than lay on it in sort of a not great position and then try and finish it down there, you know?
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, what made the change was being taught the dig mechanics for how to expose the heel when it was under the body. Because I had a way of doing it, but it wasn't very powerful. So
I mean, like I said,
I'm still agnostic about which is better, but that the detail really opened up the other side for me.
Like I said, for me, I think a big part of it is just habit. It's like what I've been doing, you know?
Well, I like your point about the way that you're transitioning to lie on the leg actually torques the leg in the way that you want to torque it in the opposite way that he wants to escape it.
Yeah.
So I'll have to play with that.
I still always go for Achilles first. Always.
Right.
Like, and, you know, and my feeling with that is like Achilles. So heel hook position is not a grip per se. It's like a steering wheel, right? So like if I don't have leg control on you, the heel hook is not very, that position on the foot isn't super valuable. Like I have to be controlling your thigh and hips for this to work, right? So if you can successfully prevent the leg control, then the escape of the heel hook is a lot easier. I like to go for the Achilles first because that's a grip. Even if I'm not going to submit you, it's a grip. Like your foot is stuck with me. Then acquire my leg control and then switch to the heel hook if that's what I want to do. So like for me, the higher, I always go for the Achilles grip, not the Achilles lock, but I always go for that position because that locks me and you together. Like we are now connected. Like, you know what I mean? Unlike, like we've all seen matches where there's like several failed heel hooks before the one that finally hits because there's a lot of rolling and rolling and rolling because there's not a solid leg control yet. Mm-hmm. You know, so I still always go to the Achilles also because if I lock down that Achilles grip, there's no way you're rolling. If you roll, you're fucking up your own knee. You know, you're going to tear your own ACL. Like
it's the one ACL I've ever torn doing leg locks was with an Achilles grip sitting there, and the guy was an idiot and decided to spin, and I should have let go, but I just held it because I didn't realize how, and I was sitting there doing nothing, and he managed to tear his own ACL just spinning as hard as he could.
And there, I just think that tactically it's a very good position because it keeps you facing me, you know, because you can't roll out, you can't spin out. You know,
right? And
so, like a really great example of this, and I did a breakdown of this on like years ago. It was Paul Harris versus Fitch, I guess.
Okay.
And if you watch that fight, Paul Harris switches back and forth between Achilles grip, heel hook, Achilles grip, heel hook, Every time he gets leg control, he goes to the heel hook. Every time Fitch clears the reap, he went back to Achilles grip.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason for that. Is because that prevents the rest of the escape after you clear the reap.
Okay.
So it's
okay. I'll have to rewatch that fight because it's been ages.
Yeah, I'll send you the link of my breakdown.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
I'd love to touch a little bit on your stunt work and your. But before we do that, I mean, you're in New York, which was kind of the epicenter of COVID, and I know that you're doing some innovative things at your club to, sort of kind of keep it running and be as safe as possible. So I'm just in the spirit of giving other club owners ideas of how they can navigate this and potentially bring back students who right now have said, I'm out. What are you doing?
So I guess let's just rewind to the beginning, like to March 2020, March 2020. Like, we first kind of realized it was going to be a real thing for us, that we were going to be closing. And when I was bringing a team to the Arnold Classic in Ohio, and this was early March, like maybe first week of March or something like that. And Governor DeWine of Ohio made the then radical decision to ban spectators from all of the Arnold's competitions, but to just allow the athletes can still go. He was like the first governor like before Cuomo, everybody was riding Cuomo's, coattails and how awesome he was and blah, blah, blah. But it was really, the Ohio governor was one of the first people to really make a big declarative statement like, hey, listen, I know this is the biggest revenue generating event for us, and I'm going to just block all spectators from coming. But we're going to allow the events to go on. So we went and still competed. And ironically, they put COVID-19 champions on the trophy because we all knew it was like a thing. We didn't, just recently popped up on my Facebook history, like the announcement that, we're going to close for 2 weeks and see where we are in 2 weeks. But like that was like over a year ago. Right. Mm. So we went to the Arnolds. We knew that this was a thing. We came back, and then obviously we knew how this thing was generating and growing. And I just knew that we were going to close. We were going to be told to close. It was so obvious. And so I started recording a bunch of lessons. I brought some my friend Mark Adami, who runs Park Slope BJJ, and we recorded a bunch of lessons. And I wanted to have him in the can because I heard everybody talking about how they were going to be doing Zoom classes and stuff like that. So I was like, man, Zoom classes, I just don't see this as a winning proposition. I just don't. I don't have a kids program. And I think it bared out that most adult programs that tried to have a Zoom program was like just an abysmal failure. It was great for kids, like as daycare, basically. But I didn't want to abandon the students either. Like I really value, and I find the gym's role as a community extremely important. Not just the community of my students, but as a business in the community and a representative of how to behave in the community and all this kind of stuff. So I didn't want to abandon the students, and I wanted them to have an outlet to continue to be active in martial arts. But I didn't want to do Zoom classes either. And I still was also trying to think of how am I going to earn a living? All these, you're juggling all these things. So I had wanted for years to set up a program like a video program companion for the school, not like my YouTube, but a private thing like an MG in Action or something like what Eric Paulson does, for his affiliates, or it's just for them. So I took advantage of it. I was like, I'm not going to do Zoom. I'm going to set up an on-demand channel that every student will get a VIP code. They can watch it for free, but it will also be available for $10 a month to anybody else who's not a student who wants to watch the videos. And that turned out to be a really good idea. The students loved the content that was coming out. And then I got a bunch of subscribers, made a couple $100 a month, when the gym wasn't making much money or any money. So for the first couple months, we closed, I think it was like March 15th or March that third week of March. And then I set up the channel, and I was putting up 2 pieces of content a week, and then some kind of free content for everybody, like who's not subscribing, or, like old stuff that I'd never released or whatever. But the stuff I recorded with Mark, and then I had a bunch of seminars in the can that I had never released, and all these other things, like guest instructors that come to my gym that I never released. I got their permission. Hey, can I use that for this? And they were like, yeah, totally. So I chopped up those into episodes. And then I had a couple of months worth of lessons that I was putting up 2 lessons a week. Then I started to run out of content, and I'm like, what am I going to do next? So I started doing match breakdowns. I started a series called Coach Sessions. And I literally have like 20 years of tournaments and videos of I could do coach session matches forever, So I started going through all my stuff, all my tournaments, all my archives, picking out really good matches. I think I have now about 80 episodes of coach sessions on the channel. I religiously did it, like 2 a week. And then we used that as a fundraiser. So like if you wanted to donate to my GoFundMe, I would do a coach sessions of one of your matches. I would break down your match and all this. So I did that. And then now I continue it. It's going to continue on forever. Now that we've reopened, now I'm putting up the instructional portions from class on the channel, and all the students have the VIP codes. They have a record of what we're doing in class. So I wanted to create something that helped the school and helped the students and actually kept them intellectually active, as opposed to just like a Zoom class, which would be like an aerobics program or something,
No, mentally engaged is huge.
Yeah. And I think the breakdowns really do that. It gave me a chance to practice my editing, so I was putting in animations and slow-mos, and I got to practice all that stuff. So, but anyway, to your point, we were closed at the end of March, and then New York was crazy dangerous. Violent crime skyrocketed. It's still very, very high. And so in April, my wife and I went into the city to pick up some gear from the gym, because I live in Queens and my gym is in Midtown Manhattan in Hell's Kitchen, right? Which it already is a kind of sketchy neighborhood. But take out the workforce and the foot traffic, it becomes really, really sketchy. But we went in to pick up like some medicine balls and stuff, because I was putting up videos of my dining room training, like uchikomi with resistance bands and medicine ball stuff. I just felt like I need to set an example for people. And people would be like, why are you putting up all these videos? I'm like, well, people are, I'm doing it for myself. Like, I ain't gonna lie, that was boring. It was boring to do the dining room training. I did it as an obligation to myself and to people paying attention. Like, if I wasn't putting them up, I don't think I would have done them, probably. I would have been lazy enough to sit back and play PlayStation and not do.
People mock Instagram culture, but you know what? A bunch of people went for a hike this last week just to get that selfie on the mountaintop. But they went for a hike.
Yeah.
Now, who am I to question that they went for a hike just to get to the cliff at the end to take a photo of them doing it, or a video of them doing a TikTok dance? Doesn't matter. They still got outside.
And I got a lot of people messaging me like, "Thank you. You're inspiring me to work out. To not stop working out." So I did that. I put up solo training videos like all through the months that we were closed. We officially started our phased reopening in the end of June, beginning of July. So in that time, there was this big, massive movement in New York and across the United States by the fitness industry demanding to be reopened, for mental health reasons and this and that, all the reasons. And I try not to judge, but I also...
While at the same time insisting that there's never been a single documented case of transmission in gyms until, of course, there have been.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like I didn't want to join that bandwagon. I never considered my business a gym per se or a fitness. I never considered myself a member of the fitness industry. In fact, my IRS status is as an educational institution. I file my taxes as a school, not as a gym or a fitness thing. So I've always classified, even just for myself, as the service that I offer a school. We're not, and so during the phased reopenings and like I said, like even just my financials, everything is education. If you look up all my taxes, it's all education. And so when the phased reopening started in New York, I started my reopening when they started allowing trade schools and technical schools and private instruction to open. That was a category. Like they had all these business categories, and one was that. And I said, that's me. I'm not going with the gym and fitness stuff because I don't offer group fitness classes. And then the state wasn't really good at really codifying what any of this stuff means. Like if you were a gym, you were sort of just all lumped into the same category of yoga, Pilates, martial arts, Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah, like everybody just like in that thing. Yeah. So I was very thankful that who knew, like when I started my LLC back all these years ago as a educational business, that it would matter now. But it did. So I opened a little sooner than the rest of the schools. And by the book, by the book. You have to do this self-certification with the state, kind of they give you a template for a safety plan. And then there's a addendum for, like what I sent you, the addendum part, which is like kind of how we were going to run the program. We went much wider than the 6-foot space that everybody, that was the standard requirement. We went 15 by 8.5 foot spaces with a foot of space in between, and then a whole nother lane for me to walk back and forth and kind of instruct from. If you're going to be throwing dummies and doing dummy work, you need more than 6 feet. So we, maybe not just grappling dummies, but we're throwing stuff. So you need a lot of room. So my school is pretty small. So our mat space gave us 3 15 by 8.5 foot squares. Each one has its own, resistance bands, throwing dummy, medicine balls, all unique gear for each section. And then we reopened the gym. And, there were a lot of reasons why people did or did not come back. But I felt it was super important to have it open just for you. We can bring it back to the mental health part, the social engagement. It's like, even though everybody was training separately, the social aspects of us training separately together was super valuable for keeping people sane, like the people that came, and for myself too, just to feel useful, even doing videos, you start to feel like, is it really useful? Is it really helping people? No, even if you get feedback from people, you just wonder, So we started doing the distance program, let's just say first week of July. I think I sent out the initial email like the last week of June to students that we were going to open. We have our HEPA filters, we have our washing stations, we have one person in the changing room at a time. I got stricter than the requirements on a lot of things. Like we not allow street PPE on the mats. We didn't, and a lot of that was based on, again, early unknowns about how the virus was transmitted. Like, and the dirt and the subways, most of the people are coming to the gym on the subways, which is filthy, and so.
Yeah, at the time, it was still thought that it was mostly transmitted by touch, or that touch was a significant component of the transmission.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, listen, everybody should have a mask dedicated for this space, and another mask dedicated to your travel. And same with changing, our clothes. I was like, listen, don't leave your shit all over the locker room like you used to. Like, take off your stuff, put it inside your bag, and leave it inside your bag, and then we'll just change one at a time.
So what have you evolved to now? Like that's early solo training.
Yeah. So I literally.
But now, like 40% of New York State is vaccinated.
Yeah. We only started the Vax Pods training like 2 weeks ago. So up until 2 weeks ago, we were still doing just only distanced, which was challenging when you see all the social media of all the other clubs in the neighborhood just disregarding stuff or doing whatever, But in a way, the fact that we were so strict the whole time it's a very, I think it's a self-filtering process, right? So we get like-minded students are coming, so it's not like, you don't really the people that are showing up to train are the people who are generally buying into the science, obviously, and the safety precautions and the health mandates, and they all get it. And they're the ones that are coming to train. I think there's a lot of students who are like, I'm not coming back until I can actually grapple. But I think those people are just not going to come back, either for normal human reasons, like a lot of people that stop training never start again, or they wait a really long time to start again, because on paper, let's say I stopped charging monthly students. And so like on paper, like I have about 80 students who have paid up tuition, for long-term memberships, or they're buying class packs, and of those 80 people, I probably have about 20 people that are coming to train in the distance program, and nobody else,
Well, let's hope as the vaccine rollout continues and those positivity numbers keep on crashing and ICU usage keeps on going down. I mean, where I live, all those trends are going in the wrong direction right now. So if I showed you a technique and I said, this works 100% of the time against everybody, no matter what the other guy does, that you'd be a red flag to know that I was full of crap.
Yeah, totally.
As opposed to a more nuanced thing is, well, if the guy does this, you might be able to do that. The essence of real martial arts is responsiveness to changing environments.
Yeah.
If we're fighting on ice, it's different from fighting on a mat. If we're fighting on this mythical lava with hypodermic needles and broken glass, we've got to take that into account.
The mats or the dojo or your club or your gym or whatever you want to call it, to me, it's just not a myth when people say that is a microcosm of how you function in life, right? So like, I really believe that the way you handle struggle on the mat and in the gym is the way you handle struggle in life. So I'm not afraid to say that all the people that quit because they didn't want to train with dummies or they didn't want to do X or Y, you just failed the biggest test. Like, you were presented with a challenge. And the whole point of what we do is to figure out ways to overcome challenges, I mean, can you imagine, like, all the people I've heard complaining about training with dummies because I can't really grapple. Can you imagine a boxer saying, like, I'm not going to hit the heavy bag.
No.
I need to hit a real person. Like, no, there's a valuable aspect to that. It's not the only thing, obviously, but there's value that can be had there. And it's the same argument I make when guys say they don't want to grapple with girls or whatever excuse people will make, or I don't want to do that tournament because they don't allow heel hooks, or I don't want to do that tournament because they allow chokes. I'm like, so you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater? You're just not going to compete at all. Like, this is an opportunity for you to grow and to explore different aspects of yourself as a human, as an athlete, and how you handle stress and all these other things, And I think that's the biggest value of what studio owners offer people is that safe space, hopefully safe space. I don't mean COVID safe. I just mean safe for people to feel vulnerable, right? And explore how they handle stuff, And that's why I did not want to close the gym at all, there are people who just ignored it. There are people who are like, have gyms that didn't implement the sort of middle ground programs that you were allowed to implement. And they're just like, I'm not opening until I can do everything, And I'm like, I don't know. That's not what this is about, right? I mean, when I
go to war with the army you have, not the army you want.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when I broke my leg in 2010, I was bedridden for 2 months, and I couldn't train like in a serious way for like at least a year. Like, I know what this is like to not be able to do something for a long period of time. And anybody who stays in combat sports long enough will have an injury or have something that stops them from training. This is just another challenge to overcome. So,
you know what, Steve? I'd really like to get into the movie and the acting thing, but I've got a hard out, and I think we've left it on a really good note. So perhaps we can kick the real fighting. We've just talked about, real sport, and we'll kick the imaginary fighting down the road to a part 2. I'd really like that, if that's okay with you.
Sure. The REEL fighting, the real fighting.
I see you're ahead of me on the wordplay. So
yeah, totally.
Steve, it's been such a pleasure making contact, and thank you very much. Thank you for setting a good example, and good luck with everything. And I look forward to part 2.
Yeah, me too, man. It was great. It was great to finally talk in person, because we've known each other online for like ever, but we've never actually chewed the fat.
Well, here's some more fat chewing.
Yeah, totally, man.